You're
Great.
listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is BAFTA and Emmy Award winning documentary filmmaker Dan Reed. Welcome to the show, Dan.
I thank you so much, Jen.
Nice to have you here. We're going to be talking about your new documentary. I can't wait to dive into Stopping the Steal, which is on HBO and streaming on Max right now. And I recommend everybody see this film before you go into the voting booth on election day. So let's get into it. So our listeners know what we're talking about. What is Stopping the Steal all about, Dan?
Stopping the Steal is about the attempt to overturn the 2020 election result. And it is a granular, very detailed, very much the inside story told by Trump supporters, told by Republicans who really wanted Trump to win and who had every reason to try to discover fraud and in the end, put their country and their constitution before their individual political interests, and therefore denied Trump the assistance that he needed to try and get the election lie over the line. And so it's called Stopping the Steal. It's a kind of obviously like an ironic echo of Stop the Steal, which was one of the MAGA slogans, as you know, at the time. But it's really about how the real steal was stopped.
It is fascinating. What drew you, being British, to dive into this? What made you decide to create this documentary?
But I need to go back a little bit to 2021, to January 6th, really. So I produced a documentary called 4 Hours at the Capitol for HBO, which you can still watch on Max. And that was just about the 4 hours, really the four most intense hours of the riot at the United States Capitol. And then I started thinking, how did this happen? I mean, what did this mean? Did all these people just turn up out of nowhere and like suddenly riot? And of course, as you follow the thread back to November 3rd, the night of the election, you realize that there was a whole lot more. And in fact, January 6th is just kind of just the last like final kind of Hail Mary pass, that the people who had devised this plan to basically steal the election, they had nowhere else to go apart from kind of threatening Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, to, if he didn't do the right thing, that the crowd would seek street justice. So, and I'm not suggesting that President Trump at the time had any kind of plans to do violence to Mike Pence, or indeed was encouraging that. But that's what the crowd was saying. They were saying, "Hang Mike Pence." So that was just the last link in the chain that goes back to November 3rd and goes back to really, I suppose you could say, relatively insignificant elected officials and appointees in the counties and the states of the United States who were just doing their job, proud Republicans, good Christians, and suddenly they became embroiled in this thing. Suddenly the streets, the base is there saying, check your facts, stop the steal, shame on Fox, all this stuff. And they're like, well, what's going on? We know that the election was well run. We know how to do this. We trust our people, and they start checking and they start counting and recounting and what have you. But to cut a long story short, these fairly low level people that you've never heard of before became the focus of incredible pressure from the White House, often directly from the White House in the form of a phone call from the President of the United States saying, look, pal, maybe you put your thumb on the scales for me, right? And so can you imagine that? Terrific pressure. And then they're also getting pressure, people turning up outside their houses saying, you're a criminal, you're a traitor. So it's very dramatic, and it's about the little people, but it's also about people like Bill Barr and the more senior officials in the White House, and in the administration, the head of communications. So you get this layered picture of what was happening. And I think it's quite gripping. It's quite a good watch. The characters are amazing, right?
It is quite a good watch. It definitely is. You, I'm amazed that Bill Barr. How did you get Bill Barr to first interview him? But how honest and open he was in this uh, documentary. I was very impressed that, I mean, we have, we can go back and forth on Bill Barr, but in this documentary, he's pretty forthright in his thoughts.
He does seem really candid, doesn't he? He seems
Yes.
very relaxed. I
Hmm.
think if you just look at the kind of mood of the interview, it's kind of relaxed. He's sitting there on a couch and he's kind of talking to you as if you were, it's kind of like a fireside chat in a way, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
and he's being brutally honest, and extremely critical of Trump and very clear about what happened and what didn't happen. How did we achieve that? I think, it's part of it is just being a good listener and putting the subject at ease and not having, I don't have a political agenda. This wasn't about whether Trump's policies are better than Biden's policies or anyone else's policies. It's really about what happened in the running of the election. Was this, something that was completely outside previous experience? I mean, so Bill Barr is the top lawyer at the time, the top lawyer in the country, right? The top government lawyer in the country. And it's his job to know if a criminal activity, basically, if crimes are being committed against the elections. And he says no. And so I think we were both focused on that and not on, his politics or anyone else's politics or, it was a very sort of narrowly focused interview. And I think he felt comfortable. But it's a great interview, isn't it? He's
Oh,
so, yeah.
yeah, it's a great interview with him. Well, it's a great interview with all of them. I want to get into, I mean, the fact that he even was willing to do the interview, I find, quite amazing right there, because I'm sure this isn't something that he like definitely, necessarily talk about.
Yes.
But you did have a great access to him, and was, in the actual interview itself was very, very revealing. But
Thank
I'm
you.
going to get into some of these other people that we don't know as well that became household names in a way because of the election. I want to, definitely want to talk about, let's talk about Sharpie Gate. Get into Sharpie Gate, and then we'll get into Rusty Bowers and Clint Hickman. But let's talk about Sharpie Gate because I thought that was something I don't think any of us had heard of before.
Well, I mean, this was one of the rumors that spread like wildfire, based on a video, a short video clip, recorded by a guy called Marko Trikovic. He's at one of the counting centers, and people are coming out saying, "Hey, they gave me a Sharpie, and the Sharpie bled through the ballot paper." And you know, in the film, we discover that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors has released videos saying, "Hey, Sharpies are fine. Don't worry about the bleed through because the ballot is not the same on both sides and it's offset and it's fine. Don't worry about it." And yet, as this video spread on social media, people formed the belief that Sharpies were being forced on voters, and therefore, the Sharpies were sort of changing a vote from Trump to Biden or spoiling the Trump vote. And once people latched onto this, it became an internet sensation, and that became Sharpiegate. And then, the Attorney General of Arizona investigates, and everyone else has to investigate, and it turns out there's no basis in fact. So that was Sharpiegate.
And so I mean, you have wonderful footage. How did you get access to the footage around the Sharpies?
Well, I mean, some of that footage is just the result of diligent searching online. My wonderful colleagues who, we're very, as a company, as a production company, we're very rigorous. We like to do our research as well as we can. We're very stubborn. And so, we wouldn't rest until we got all of the Sharpiegate videos ever. And that's what you see. We also did, we get some if people have interesting video, we'll contact them and say, hey, have you got any more of your your unbroadcast footage, your footage that, and we'll we'll license that from them, and so you get a bit more than just what's online.
Well, that was fascinating in itself. All right, let's dive into Clint Hickman. Let's tell the audience who Clint Hickman is and a little bit
So
about.
Clint Hickman is he's a real darling. He's the was the chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. Now, Maricopa County is the second biggest voting district in the United States. It is very, very important in the 2020 election. And Clint Hickman is the man in charge. He's the chairman of this 5-man Board of Supervisors, and they're in charge of running the election. They're also in charge of stuff like pest control and pets and sweeping the streets and all sorts of stuff. So you would never have heard of Clint Hickman, right?
Right.
In a normal election, but suddenly Clint Hickman is the guy who has got an X on his head, and he's the guy that has to make the call. He's one of the people at the election. So all of this pressure, and you've got crowds outside chanting "Stop the steal," and calling them all sorts of names. And these 5 really ordinary guys in their suits just have to all decide to certify the election or not. And they're getting calls from the Arizona Republican Party, from the leader of the party in Arizona, saying, "Hey, guys, do you want to read? Stuff going on here. Do you want to read? Do you want to speak to the president?" And so all of this pressure from the top and also from the bottom is creating a pressure cooker. And he's so emotional. He actually cried in the interview, and you can see him. Yeah, you can see him tearing up actually in the video footage we have from that day. He said, when the vote is taken and all 5 of them agree to certify the election, his voice cracks and he says, "I'm so proud to serve with people who have integrity." And it's an emotional moment for me as well. And he breaks down in the interview, and that really moved me. And I thought, hey, this is great. This is a really honest man and a great elected official.
He really was.
So
and he
yeah.
Go ahead. He was doxxed. This is a word I never even heard of until recent. I mean, what does that
Yeah.
mean? And you're right. He was very emotional in that. But tell the audience, because I had to look it up to find out what doxing really means. I mean, this has been around a long time and we just weren't aware of it, but it's in our culture even more now since this election.
Well, doxing. So Hickman and his colleagues were doxed, which means that their home address and their personal details were posted online, and which meant that pretty quickly a crowd formed outside his house. And we have body cam footage, from a police officer who was there, and you can see all these people gathering outside his house and flags and chanting and all that. And you can hear Clint getting a little bit antsy, getting a little bit worried. And he's saying, "Please, please tell them to leave, please." And you can sort of hear the tremor in his voice. And he says in the interview, "If you come in my house, you better hit the deck because I'm firing." So, the guy is obviously a gun owner and he wasn't going to let anyone in his house.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And then they show pictures of, the police in their film. I can't remember exactly which part this was, that, this crowd's outside and they all have AR-15s.
Yes.
I think it was Arizona. And the police are inside and they're like, okay, this whole crowd is armed that's out here. What do we do? I mean, that's chilling. It's just chilling to see that.
It is chilling. It's also, and here I'm speaking with my British angle, right?
Right.
I also find it incredible that no one fired. Not a shot was fired. So
What a
I don't know.
blessing.
Yeah, does that make me optimistic about, firearms discipline in the United States? Or does it make me pessimistic that people are turning up outside a voting center with assault weapons? I'm not sure, which way. I probably feel a little pessimistic about that. But it's a terrifying display of force. You have people in combat gear with body armor, tactical gear, helmets, ready to go,
Yes,
ready to fight
yes, yes. And
on
and
the
and
basis of a complete fiction.
yeah, the lies. I mean, this whole, I love you. Whack-a-mole is a word that was used at number five in this film too. That people were playing whack-a-mole, but all the lies and the rhetoric that was stirring up this crowd, and now to finally, after all these years, a lot of people still believe that election was stolen, and that finally to have Trump now, admit that, he did lose by a little teeny bit, I think he just said recently,
Right.
and all those people have got to feel incredibly disappointed in that. I mean, there are a lot of people you have in there that are in this film that are disappointed, were disappointed even after they went to the Capitol on January
Mm.
6th. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But Rusty Bowers, I want to get to him because I thought he was really compelling also.
Yeah. Rusty, amazing character, amazing interview, amazing man, actually.
Yes, yes, yes.
He really touched me, touched my heart.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. He's such a great raconteur. I mean, he does all the conversations,
Yes,
he's phone to the president and Rudy Giuliani, and he does all the parts.
I
Not
thought that
not
was
quite different voices, but and the way we've edited it, I think really brings that out.
it does,
Um,
it does. I thought he had an acting career coming up next.
yeah, but I love his face. He looks like sort of some kind of Mormon Clint Eastwood. Um, and so Rusty's story is he's the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Arizona, a politician with a great deal of respect and long career, an arch conservative, loves Trump's policies. And then he gets a call from Trump and Giuliani's saying, there's this obscure Arizona law that allows you to replace Trump's electors replace Biden's electors, excuse me, with Trump's electors. You can just switch, like, you can say the elections, there's something a bit fishy about this, and I think we're just going to give the state to Mr. Trump. And he was like, I'm not going to do that. There's no proof. If you want to convince me, you have to bring me proof. And so that's part of the sort of tragicomedy of this great chapter in the film is Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis come to town and they have their presentation to some Arizona lawmakers, and then they have a meeting with Rusty, and Rusty goes, "So, did you bring the proof?" And apparently, one of them reaches into their briefcase and like, "Oh no, I forgot it in the hotel room." And so, and the way Rusty tells it is so funny; it really
It
cracks me
is.
up. And
It
and then
is.
he goes, "Right, so fine, I'm out of here." And he wouldn't call that special session of the Arizona legislature because he knew that that was a way in for the the election fraud people, the election deniers, to try and throw sand in the gears of the electoral process and have a Republican leaning legislature say, look, no, this wasn't right. There's something wrong with the election and let's delay, or. So this was largely about trying to drag the election into the legislature and away from the voters of the state, away from the voters of the counties, and have the result decided not by voters, but by lawmakers, state lawmakers. And so this went on, and it went up to a point where it was too late for that to work at a state level. And then, of course, Trump pivots to his loyal and ever faithful vice president, Mike Pence. And we have two great interviewees. We have counsel, his lawyer. They tell the story with amazing drama and fluency.
Freezing up a little bit.
Are you there?
Yes,
Jan?
you're freezing up a little bit though.
You frozen.
I'm frozen and you're a little, you are too. Darn. All right, there
Oh,
you're back. You're back. Good. We were talking about Mike Pence.
But how much did you lose? Oh,
You just
yes. So I
started
was talking
about
about Mike Pence. Yeah.
Mike
So
Pence and their lawyers.
yeah. So we interviewed. We have two great interviewees, two great characters on screen to tell the Mike Pence story. It's his chief of staff, and we haven't really heard much from either of these two so far. So I'm very excited that we got those interviews. Greg Jacob, his lawyer, Pence's lawyer, who has the last word in the film. You know, they talk about how important it was. Um, and Greg Jacob, who's this very reserved, very thoughtful man, he ends the film by saying, you know, if you don't put someone of strong, honest character in that job, the most powerful job in the country, then that could be the end of the republic. I thought that was a very striking thing to say. This isn't the guy who talks crap, who, you know, exaggerates and uses figures of speech. This is a man who literally meant, with all of his lawyerly discretion and careful wording, that it could be the end of American democracy. So I thought, wow, this wasn't. It's kind of funny. The film, there's a lot of humor in the film, but in the end, it's not funny. In the
No.
end, and the gumming up of American democracy, the undermining of its legitimacy, the undermining of people's belief that, yeah, we have elections, and that's a time when we can all, our voices can be heard, and, you know, and if the person who loses has to go, and the person who wins comes in, and that's how it all works. And if we lose faith in that, then we're in a very dark place. So yeah, what's going to happen in 2024? I don't know. I have no idea. Will it happen again? Why wouldn't it? Obviously,
Well,
Mr. Trump isn't president anymore,
right.
but no one can predict. But I'm hoping that it will somehow turn out differently, and the loser will accept the loss, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and then we'll look back on 2020 as a sort of, you know, bit of a dark chapter that is over and done with, and we're back to normal election. But
Hope
somehow
so.
I think that our faith in our democratic system has been weakened, and I think it needs restoring.
Yeah.
So
I
that's why I try to make this film, to go, hey, look, this is what really happened. This is the detail of what happened, and then make up your own minds about whether you think that's a thing that should be acted on, or whether, you know, I leave it up to the audience to make up their own minds. It's not a political film. It's not trying to tell you to be a liberal or a conservative or anything. It's just trying to say, well, this is actually in granular detail with the real people on the inside who do not have an axe to grind, okay, against Trump, who love Trump, who wanted him to win, but they're telling the story. And I believe them because they have no political interest in lying.
Right. Right. And that's why I think everybody should see this film, because you're right. It isn't Republican or Democrat. It's just telling the story of what happened and
Mm-hmm.
by the people that were inside that were being affected by what happened. I loved that. I don't know if it was Rusty Bowers, Clinton, or maybe it was all of them. They were going, these are my people
Yeah.
coming after me. I can't remember which one said that. And I was like,
Yeah, but this was Rusty Baz when the crowd turned up. There was an armored personnel carrier and people with weapons turning up outside his house. Incidentally, as his daughter, his very ill daughter, lay dying in the house, and he was getting this mob outside calling him a pedophile, calling him all sorts of names, and, you know, and he's like, "These are my people. These are, you know, conservative people doing this, and conservative politicians taking aim at him and trying to take him down." And that's what happened. He's you know, he's no longer in the legislature. You know, he's paid the price for.
I know. I think a lot of them, didn't they all, many of them decide not to stay in government after this, after that whole, the seeds are being planted again for 2024, as we know. The rhetoric is there. And we just hope that it doesn't happen again. I think people are tired of it. I think we're all tired of the lies. And I think I want to believe that America is smarter than, uh, than other people think, that this person who's spewing these lies believes they are, because it's heartening, heartening.
Well, this was, the thin red line that held in 2020. So let's see what happens in 2024.
And a lot of those people are gone. So well, everyone, please, 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 Stopping the Steal. It's on HBO. It's streaming on Max. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's very, very well done. It's entertaining and enlightening and educational. And I think everybody who lived through the 2020 election should definitely see it. And some of the first time voters that, didn't vote in 2020 should definitely see it. So it's a wonderful documentary. It
Thank you
really
so
is.
much.
So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jan. It's been a pleasure.
I look forward to having you back on for your next documentary. What are you working on real fast?
I'm actually working on a film about October 7th, the
Oh, okay.
last attack in Israel, which is, yeah,
Oh,
that's for Channel 4 here in the UK. Very controversial, I guess. But yeah, it's the story of one community, and it's very detailed, and yeah, it's pretty hard. It's a hard watch, but
okay.
I think
Well,
it's a story that
well,
needs to be told.
I'm sure again, it's going to be very enlightening and educational for all of us.
Thank you,
Thank
Jan.
you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dan.
Cheers.
Have a great day.